Who here has really used VR? Okay, cool. Who's at an agency? So like 3/4. Brands, client side? Small, okay, good. Do you guys want to learn more about my perspective on the why we should do VR stuff or the how we do VR stuff? How? No one else cares? All right, we'll mix it up 50-50, but we'll go mostly on the how. So what is VR content? I think we need to set that first, because if we aren't all talking about the same thing, it doesn't matter what I say, because we are all misaligned and don't have context. So this is what consumers think it is. It's like a holodeck. This is what the media thinks it is. This is what Silicon Valley appears to think it is. This is what my mom thinks it is. This is what brands think it is, which makes sense. And this is what I think a lot of agencies seem to think it is. So virtual reality by definition, and I don't want to be too nerdy, but the computer-generated simulation of a three-dimensional image or environment that can be interacted with in a seemingly real or physical way by a person using special electronic equipment, yada, yada, yada. 360 video is none of those things. So I'm not going to downplay 360 video, but I want to talk about it in context to real virtual reality. Okay, now with that in our heads, who has really used VR? Poll number 2. The numbers are going down, right? Because we think so much about VR as watching videos in 360, which is a cool experience and profound when compared to a flat screen, right? Who's really producing VR content in the agency world? Not many people. Production studios are, and probably the smart money right now, if you're a big agency, is to lean on your production studio partners who are making investments in doing what they do really well, as opposed to you sinking a couple $1 million into doing something you're not sure about, your clients aren't sure about, and that's likely to change in front of you. Why 360 video, I think, makes sense and is happening at the rate it is because it plays back on the web too, so it's not like I create this thing and then it's stuck in some app for gamers. It can be produced with existing teams. It's familiar, right? New camera equipment, get out of the way, go hide behind the pole, and then hit record. It's obviously not that simple, but it feels familiar. It's not too techy, and it's easy for people to understand. This is an example of BMW, but we've seen a lot of examples today, and a lot of people are doing a lot of really interesting stuff here. I like 360 video because it's driving adoption of VR headsets, because people see 360 video, they start with a cardboard, they might move to a gear, then they go, oh hey, maybe I should invest in one of these bigger systems. We see the challenges that Oculus is now having because of the Vive. What he mentioned on the panel earlier about Sony PlayStation, that's the gorilla, right? Like there's 40 million PlayStations out there. If that thing is cool enough, consumers will jump on that at the holiday season, and all of a sudden we have a market, which is what the brands are waiting for, which we all know. But there's more to VR, right? So Chris Milk makes this comment, suddenly the challenge is no longer suspending our disbelief, but remembering that what we're experiencing isn't actually real. If you have used really good VR, you have had the experience where you take the thing off and you go like, whew, like, wow, Jesus, amazing. Compared to the full potential, so Lee Christie is a guy that works for me. Last night we were hanging out talking about this, and he made this and experiencing and feeling, smelling, sitting and turning my head. It makes a lot of sense, but again, it's a great starting point. This is an example quickly. I'm not going to talk too much about our work. This is video content created in VR. Actually, said the travel industry is prime for this kind of stuff, which it really is, because I can transport you to a new place, and a place that really feels real. So this is thing we're doing wide. This is the balcony of Wyndham Hotel in Bruce House from the movie. Make any more custom, but it's rendered and putting on it feels completely really there. Versus like I'm watching a camera that's really there. Somebody mentioned education. Giving a test, and there's enough educational. This is really interesting. This is all captured by phones. Use a technique called photogrammetry, which is where I can buy, or you can regular physical space. I take a bunch of pictures from all these different, where we put through together. I can like jump into with models. terrible. And it's weird. Is it enough context for education? Like, I'm standing on the roof of this place. I feel weird, dizzy, like I'm going to fall off. So there's opportunities for VR where even if the content isn't immaculate, it's transformative because you're in a different base in a different time, right? And so we talked about immersive. Who's immersive video 3 years to create something immersive? Has anybody really created something immersive? Not until today, I don't think, because, well, we haven't had the means. VR headsets take a lot of different forms, and this is big news because we have been on this trajectory. Like, cardboard's cool, scalable, but I can create kind of low impact, low interactive experiences, but I can scale them out to millions of people easily. And then I move down the line. I've got Gear, Vive, which changed the game, right? Room scale. Does everybody know the concept of room scale VR versus other VR, right? So room scale VR is this idea that with my headset on, I can now walk around, right? So I'm not just looking at, we'll use an example, I'm designing a desk with a sales associate from Herman Miller, right? And so they're in their office and I'm in my office, we both have VR headsets on, and they're talking me through a process, and I can see the desk, but I can walk around the desk. I can open a drawer. I can do things with these controllers that make me feel as if I'm in a space and the room itself that I'm in becomes my space versus being stationary, sitting and looking around. Very different experiences, but we are lumping all of this together as VR, and I think that's okay. So these depth of experiences, I think this is where all me doing a talk here kind of started, was this position that we've got passive, moderately interactive, and then fully immersive stuff. They are different. They're also different production processes. So passive experiences, you're kind of along for the ride. In VR, if I were to create a VR app, this is what they call on rails. I'm sitting, I'm observing, I'm moving through something that's different. It could be a video. It could also be a 3D rendered world. But I don't do anything really. Moderate interactive, I guess, no, but I like control of the experience in full. You're still guiding me, but then fully immersive is I'm in this room and I can kind of do anything a person could do in this room. I can move around, I can grab things, I can leave. I can look in your bag, I can take your phone, stick it in my pocket. Not that I would, but I could. And so this idea of these new platforms give us a new levels of engagement, so new interaction styles, this idea of the power of simulation, which I could not do before. Again, go back to travel, right? What is it like to be there? I'm going to spend $7,000 on a vacation, the only $7,000 I'm spending on vacation this year. I haven't had a vacation in 2 years, and damn it, I want it to be great. What is it gonna be like? Can I get a reasonable expectation of what it's really like? And now I can actually see it. And then enhanced collaboration, which doesn't go necessarily in the line of marketing per se, but I like to think, and I'm stealing this line from our CEO who stole it from somebody else, and once I met the guy who I can attribute it to, and I can't remember his name, but the saying is, you can make people want things, you can make things people want, and in our world, doing digital product and service design, we try to make things people want, and we use all of the things that agencies do in insights and data and measurement and optimization and things to create product lines and services that are there. And on the enterprise side, the idea for advanced collaboration, both in the process of creation and in the launching of a thing and a new product and service is potentially amazing. Somebody mentioned buying cars, right? If I can, like, what if I really wanted to customize a car? I want to customize a motorcycle. Spend 80 grand on a motorcycle that you're going to make for me. Let's work together on it versus like you sending me drawings over email, because this is obviously a much better experience. I'm not going to go into these in depth. Get your cameras out, take some pictures. It's a new medium for storytelling. We all get that. Music and entertainment obviously make a lot of sense, but what we don't want to do is see the next 5 years consisting of us watching passively things happen. We can do that today on flat screens. It's better. Being in a basketball game is better, but again, my field of view, like I'm here, and the rest of what I don't care about is where my opportunity lies, right? And I think that there's more that we can do with it. It allows us to visualize the future. So what will the future be like? What is that future product? What is that future space? This is great for the real estate market, obviously. What is my home going to be like? Can I walk through my home? Can I adjust the kitchen cabinets? I don't like brown anymore. I thought I liked the brown floor, but it clashes with the countertops. And all of these types of things. But we also have this idea to see future cities and get excited and build really emotional attachments to things that don't yet exist. A taste of the impossible. You ever go diving with a whale? I haven't. I don't plan on it, but I can. Now I can. I could go to space. Our CEO the other day had a Vive headset on. He launched some NASA app, or an app that had it was a trip to the moon. And he jumped and he screamed, and I looked over. I'm like, "Are you all right?" And he was going up in the elevator to the top of the rocket, and it was like it's this visceral reaction, like I can't control myself. There's a company called WorldViz that makes a VR development platform. They have an app that is basically you stand here and you push a button on the keyboard, and the floor drops out, and you're left standing on like a beam. It's a demo app. Every person I've ever put through that app completely freaks out, right? Their heart rate goes up like panic attack. And you're like, it's okay, you're still in the same place, you're in the office, right? It's carpet, touch it. And it's like, no, I can't do this, and they take the headset off. So we have this opportunity. I mean, we talk about emotionally connecting with people and brands and connecting with our consumers. Emotionally connection through an ad banner on a website, I mean, come on. This provides a real opportunity to do real emotional connections. New ways to collaborate and share. And then considerations, right? So these are the switch are moving into the world of, it's all very cool, but I've heard a lot from people like, how do we measure this, right? Like, is this paying me back? What's the ROI, right? We're worried about that a lot. We said those same things when the web started. We said the same things when mobile was a thing. We're saying the same things now. And VR, let's be clear, we've talked about AR too, or mixed reality. If you think VR is cool and a big opportunity, just wait 5 or 7 years when we get rid of the form factor of weirdness and you're able to have not room scale, but world scale. I can create any kind of content anywhere. I mean, imagine walking through New York and seeing a history of New York played back through vignettes that look like ghosts acting things out, like as you stand at Broadway and 17th. You know, I mean, it's freaking amazing. It's all of the things that we've ever dreamt that computers could do, but now can do. And then obviously, this one's really quick. We talk a lot about reaching consumers, but there's a lot of internal uses for this. So if you're an agency like Sapient Nitro or Isobar or RGA, and you have a lot of enterprise clients and you do a lot of that work also, there's a huge opportunity in this space. I mean, it's about half and half mixed, like $1 billion or $2 billion in one direction. So you're ready to dive into VR content and experience creation. Everybody on your team thinks that's really cool. You guys have used these headsets. You've got a Vive set up, and everybody says, yes, we need to do it. But that's not easy necessarily because there are challenges. You need new skills once again, right? You just got the mobile team up and ready, and now who am I going to get to do this stuff? It's gaming platforms, just to be clear, right? Unity, Unreal Engine, there's WorldViz is another one, specifically designed for VR. There will be more. We could have a whole debate on what's better, Unity or Unreal Engine. But I find that mobile developers, because you can write Unity apps that are for mobile, so there's an easier skill translation. Also, mobile developers have been more accustomed to change quickly over the last several years. So I feel like if you have back-end developers that have been doing kind of the same thing for 7 or 10 years, versus mobile developers that have had a rapid pace of change in their skill sets, they might be more akin to be moved into the world of VR development, but it probably makes sense to go out and find some folks that are game developers or familiar with these gaming platforms to lead those teams and lead that transition. Second, they're moving fast, right? So capital expense. There's a question amongst agencies on, okay, so which part of VR do we play in? I can come up with the ideas, and I can endorse a movie studio now, because there's a lot of elements to and parallels between like movie or film production and art production if you're going to do these really immersive experiences. But let's say you're going to do motion capture. Do I find a motion capture studio that exists? Can they do what I want them to do at the scale I need them to do it? If not, do I buy that stuff? Is it changing really fast? Do I invest 300 grand on a big motion capture rig, and then the CFO is like, hey, you need another one of these things because the thing you bought 6 months ago isn't good enough anymore. I don't understand, right? So I think that's a big worry, that where do we dip our toe? Do we invest first before we start getting paid back? And how do we convince clients to be the ones that help us pay back these investments that we're making? I fortunately work for a place that is all about innovation and investing in innovation, and so I'm fortunate to be able to go invest in some of this stuff ahead of that so that we are ready when the wave comes crashing down, or the wave to ride, if you will. Depends on how you look at it. Design processes need to change. So flat wireframes don't work. You can kind of storyboard stuff out in really early conceptual phases, but we're building stuff for HoloLens and for VR headsets and like the Vive and Oculus, and we're actually designing stuff in VR. So like my UX design team is now starting to learn to prototype really roughly, working with developers side by side. So back to this collaborative design development process. Early in the prototyping phase, right? Prototypes are super critical. And there's one warning, right? I can come up with the greatest idea in the world, and like we're all like proud of ourselves because we have this great idea, and then we have some guys prototype it, we're like, look, we made a scene, look, it's amazing. And then all of a sudden, you start adding stuff and adding stuff. And if you've met, which you probably have if you work at an agency, the people from Oculus and the content and talking about Oculus content, hey, what's really tricky is to make that amazing futuristic vision come to life in VR and still maintain a frame rate that's consistent with your brain understanding what's going on. Because if you don't, you'll throw up, or you'll fall over, or you'll be nauseous, and that's the biggest complaint they are, like, oh, it made me dizzy. Well, okay, the prototype, everybody loves it, and then you're like, yeah, I have bad news. Other things, we have too many polygons, and like the thing's gonna freak out on a consumer device. If I'm doing an out-of-home thing in person and I control the environment, we've been working with NKTG, which is a on some taken frame, no one, we never had with scaling content production. Somebody else mentioned this. It's like, it's complicated, right? So you want to recreate real good physical worlds, you can do it in 2 weeks and make something that can contort around, and they go, wow, this is really cool. Then you're like, well, I want to add interactivity, and then I want to hit a database and pull down a product catalog, or yada, yada, yada. And as you add these things, all of a sudden, it's like, well, it's really expensive. That one scene cost twice what our website cost. That may be an iteration. I would expect that if you're thinking about a VR app or multiple platforms which need to be built for those, you're looking at probably 150 to 3 low end, probably more for a really good experience, 5 to 1 million, I don't know, and then take it from there. How much do video games cost to develop at a large scale? I'm not suggesting that Brickle develop AAA rated video games, right? That doesn't make any sense yet. But I do think that the software companies know this. Like Adobe's not stupid, they see the numbers. We all used Flash in Photoshop a few years ago. Now 90% of things that we're launching are done on Adobe's enterprise content management platform with analytics and everything else. They have to be looking at this thing, wow, opportunity to help scale action and measurement and all these other things. Content management along those lines. We're pretty versed in content management, and we're actually building out now in some of our projects CMS related things so that I can attach my VR app to content so business people can add content to applications as opposed to having a 15-person game development team that is on hold and can't do anything else because they're making updates to this client's app while we have 3 more apps in potential we built. So, right out but stuff. Now we need repatriation. We need to solve these problems. Why I am controlling a budget or a CMO, I'm like, that's cool if we do it once. I don't want to do it once. I need it to live like our websites. We don't want to make those same mistakes that we made in the past. That's a quick thanks. I'm going to show you really quickly. So if we approach this, you can kind of, I obviously don't have time to go through all these, but the process that we've with is sort of like the development process, but with more game flavors thrown into it. You're not developing games for brands, and so some of those things that you in the game world matter to brands, scrub, and then we have to add things that do matter to brands. As an example, like who's my audience? Specifically, am I trying to get a purchase out of this, right? Am I trying to get somebody to do something other than come back and play and win more points? So discovery and planning. Concept development is where we spend most of our time, right? This is getting it right before you go full bore. And one of the things that I think is really interesting here that somebody mentioned earlier is this idea of analytics and experience testing. How do I do user experience testing in VR? Because if you do it, example for the Vive, it's this physical thing I have to have set up, I have to have people come to me, my team all has to go use it, but how do I measure it? And so we're working using, I won't go into the whole thing, there's a platform for you testing that we have metric sets, and then we can measure heart rate, breathing, we can't do facial analysis yet, eye tracking. Because at a point in time, VR, I know that the most working is for more people to do that. Are they excited? And you're looking like, not. Oh, we need to change the experience in a way so that we understand. Because the user's going to get done, they're going to take the headset off and be like, oh, that was really cool. But what parts of it resonate with you, what motivated you and what didn't? So there's some science in that piece too. And then in the VR concept, prototype it's much more complicated. So you're going to spend more time and more money and more effort as an agency doing this stuff. The question is, do you partner with people, end up acquiring them? Do you do this yourself? Do you wait? I think that's up to everybody's individual strategy. I can tell you we're full on. So, ask similar. Use a specific example. Got a lot of, it's very interesting. It was innovative in terms of what they're doing, but it looked like Grand Theft Auto from 10 years ago in terms of the quality of the 3D model environment. Why? Because it's complicated, really hard to see what we're doing. So we're going to hire people on your agencies to help in that process. Go for the people who buy fame, the people that make all stuff on look, it's not really real. You can also obviously contract them out. There's a burnout. Does TV get you your skills, or get your skill? And actually, TV in VR, it's way out. And then lastly, you have a kind of a internal saying that the most important any project for us after launch it, because it's what we build, is performance and listening and measurement, and being able to apply those insights to VR. If you think about something else with Netflix and Netflix's big data, which is really interesting in how they produce content, do that with VR, right? Measure, listen, look, and then create additional content over time that is of interest to users. Don't go like, I've been going to do it and not care. And that, my friends, I'll leave you with this one so you can share it on social media, because I think it's fun. That's it. Thanks. And if you have any questions, I might have time. Otherwise, thank you very much.
We have time for a couple of questions. Quick question.
Yeah.
How do you see the market going in terms of the stream, what you've talked about in IoT daily as is like GM or I'm more monstrous in size, something like that?
So there was an example, full transparency, had a meeting with Oculus and the content team around Gear VR, and this question comes up about branded content. So if you create a video for your brand, they are going to put it in the video section of that store. It will not be, and they use this exact example. Somebody, and I think somebody is actually doing this, so reach out to them if you like this. They're creating a documentary that is a dad and a son restoring a car. So which one wants the car? Porsche? Is it an old Mustang? Right. So there's content. I'm going to get a right. That's a 360 video now of a dad and a kid restoring a car, and that's more emotive, and that's a really nice story. I stopped 18 minutes in where we talk about the first thing we need to do, son, is we're going to take the engine out. How do we do that? Well, we've got a key to power, right? So now I can go have a thing on and other product saying, and I can lift the engine out, and I can actually do what they're doing along with them. How cool would it be to have branded content that I'm actually like participating in and learning from, specifically around those kinds of tasks? So I think there's opportunities selling records. So how far can you push it? I want to push it really far. But it's a great one. And chicken or egg. There's not enough headsets out there to make these experiences really worthwhile. But could you create something with the Sony or something that's like, God, they're going to sell 80 million headsets instead of 40?
Question around of your numbers, so like 500 and more to create. Now, what I'm thinking is, would it make sense to go backwards from that? So instead of, we always see the TV spot created first, and then we're going to put that online, and it's going to be a video. Would it make sense to, in the future, be creating a VR experience first that we can cut down to create a television spot or a 15-second or whatever? is that something you guys are thinking about as a way to create the absolute best experience, but also the absolute best TV spot or whatever that content becomes?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I haven't really thought about that because most of the stuff that I've been working on is really around product or service development. So I already have, like sort of say, Wyndham Worldwide, where we have, this is our product, right? These places. I want to show you the place. Could I eventually use cameras inside the place we create and shoot? Absolutely. That's really interesting. I think the challenge there to today's audience, right? We expect photorealism across the board in order to like buy into it. I think my 6-year-old kid, when he's 18, like doesn't care, right? Like if it's virtual or film, that doesn't matter to him because he's so used to the virtual being normal, you know?
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Technology is great when it works, right? Thanks for being here today. As the joke went, like I play a lot of Pokemon Go with my kid, right? And I think Nintendo historically, what they've done is very interesting in that, like the early Nintendo, Wii, and then even with Pokemon Go, is they sort of took something and they made it very easy, very simple, very intuitive. So my grandparents can play, I can play, my parents can play, my kids can play, their friends can play, and it really sort of bridged generations. But then in some cases, like, I did a presentation yesterday at the MMA event, and I talked about this idea, just because you can, maybe you shouldn't. And so I think what ruined the Wii for Nintendo was when they created Wii U. They made it too fancy, too complicated. I had this, thing this almost the size of this podium to like control the console attached to the TV. And what I think was very interesting about it is I think it largely woke up a lot of the world to the fact that, and I'm a product development innovation guy. And so I like to think that augmented reality is innovation for today for a lot of brands. Connected shopping experiences, building your own car, like all sorts of crazy stuff. And VR, while cool, and we joked with us in the back room, and I know it's not the most popular topic, but I think VR right now is kind of the land of gamers and porn producers. It's innovation for tomorrow. We're gonna get there. It's going there. And if anybody hasn't read the book, go read the book Ready Player One. It's a fascinating story of the pros and cons of where this AR, VR life could lead us, right? So with that's why I was really excited to come moderate this panel today. So with that, so I don't hijack the mic too much because the clock is ticking, I'm gonna let my esteemed panelists here introduce themselves and we'll sort of jump in to the fun of what does Pokemon Go mean to marketers going forward.
So just little intros.
Yeah, dude,
Sure.
take it away.
I'm Jason Siegel, partner and creative director at Blue Text. We are an integrated digital agency in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., working with a lot of cool brands, doing a lot of work with Microsoft, Google, and Stanley Black & Decker right now, doing a lot of VR and augmented reality work that hopefully we'll talk through in today's panel.
Hi, I'm Marley Kaplan. I'm the head of innovation at Kinetic. We're WPP's out-of-home advertising agency. We work to connect consumers on the move, and we're location-based experts.
And I'm Jake Bennett, the CTO of Pop. We're a full-service digital shop out of Seattle. Actually work with Pokemon as a client and several retailers as well, and do AR, VR, MR, XR, whatever you call it.
So have you caught Pikachu?
No, although I did hear there's a cheat when you first start to get it, and I tried the cheat, and it didn't work, so no Pikachu for me.
It wasn't like Conga in the old Nintendo, like A, B, A, B, A, B, A, and then Pokemon was there, right? Like,
Contra, right.
Yeah.
Up, down, up, down.
Dude, right? We all sort of grew up with that, which is sort of funny about it. So now, given the nature of it, and like we were talking in the backstage room, in that everybody talks about Pokemon Go as this augmented reality game. But what's funny is my 8-year-old son, my microphone's coming apart, informed me that if I really wanted to rack up points and crush it, quote unquote, from an 8-year-old, I needed to turn off AR. Because if the AR is on, Pokemon's jumping around of all your heads, and I have to like run my phone around and spin around in circles and keep my phone pointed at the moving Pokemon. But if you turn AR off, I could sit on the train with my phone between my legs, and the Pokemon is always centered in the phone, no matter where my phone is, right? So if you think about that, the location benefits that they're tapping into in the phone, the potential of the extension of that augmented reality, like, I'll just sort of just toss it out to you guys in general, like, where does it go from there from a marketer? Is it about connected shopping experiences? Is it what?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on an important point, which in my mind, and this is going to sound like blasphemy here today, but I don't think Pokemon Go is about AR. I mean, the reality is that technology has existed for a long time. The game Ingress, upon which it was based, has been around for a long time. What made it really good was it was a great concept that worked with a brand, and it was about three technologies: AR, mobile, and proximity. And I think to your point, it's still awesome even without the AR. And so I think a lot of times...
I gotta say, I play with my son all the time. It still is. Like,
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of folks, the moment that came out, we had folks come to us that were saying, hey, I got to do a Pokemon thing. And it's sort of asking the wrong question. It's really about how do you dissect the elements that made it good from a technology perspective, put that in your toolkit, then come up with a really great experience that uses them or not, sort of depending on what your business needs are.
Yeah, and I think off of that, is it working? Okay. I think off of that, what is interesting is it's not, like you said, necessarily about Pokemon Go itself, but that it shows that there's a need for this real world and digital connection that, the whole branding industry is still kind of on the cusp of figuring out. So when you have people that are walking around with their phone in front of their face, how do you engage with them in a contextual way that makes sense where they are in the moment? And what's interesting about Pokemon Go and why, a brand such as McDonald's did jump on this, and they're creating these sponsored Pokemon gym spots, is because that the consumer is in a specific context, a specific frame of mind, where you can engage with them in an authentic and interesting way instead of just serving them a mobile ad.
so let me jump in quick before you answer that and throw you a curveball here and say, given that, and the nature of, tailoring that to the utility of the moment, whether it's entertainment or, right, you're buying a movie, are there implications of that for other areas? Like, from a development perspective, and you're trying to create the creative and the story and leverage the technology and the functionality of the phone, like, why did that work and others haven't?
So when we're working with Intel, they're often looking at how can we get more brand recall, and what we say to them is what creative will involve more sensories. So with augmented reality, we did a brick breaker game that would use no phone at all, no BYOD. It was all based on a shirt handout, and you sit in your chair and you become the actual element that does the brick breaker back and forth. So what Intel found is through that interactive experience, they were able to use sound, touch, all the different sensories, and the brand recall and the engagement was much, much higher than ever before. So what we're seeing is much more gamification implications playing out into more sensories to create the brand recall these clients are looking for.
Right on. So given that, you're trying to create that sort of, like, ultimately that experience that the brand needs that matches what the consumer wants. And I'm sort of lobbing this out to any of you guys, and you can sort of like catfight over who sort of jumps in on it, right? Like, no one person, right? But like, with that experience, like, what then really defines like AR, VR? Is it that I'm walking around REI with the REI app and the beacons are picking up that I'm looking at this shoe, gives me additional information? Is it, like Pokemon, where it's actually becoming location as I'm moving around outside of physical locations? Is it enhanced experiences? Like, what?
I think that what consumers are expecting now from brands, I mean, content is king, is that really people want value, and so what the experience is very important, because it's not, like I said, just about, seeing an ad, serving an ad. But it's about the interaction and, like you mentioned, the sensory of interacting with the brand.
So given that, now let me sort of amend that question then based on that answer, because I thought that was really good. Like, given that then, if I'm going to take a client down this path, or if I'm a brand and I'm like, I want to go down this path, do I got to do it in an app? Is it mobile web? Like, are you incentivizing the customer differently? Like, what does that look like?
It totally depends on the business problem. And I think, it seems funny to talk about the business problem in the context of Pokemon Go, but it's important to remember this is their product. This isn't a brand marketing
Well, it
experience.
is a business problem,
This is
right?
core to
It
their
saved
product.
Nintendo,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I think part of this too is there was a latent user need to go find Pokemon in the world, right? And if you've enjoyed the game and you've played it and you've been along with it, then you want to go find these things. There's this latent need. So in that specific instance, it made sense to use a phone to get people out in the world to go find these Pokemon that they always wanted to do. I think in other situations, it makes more sense to have a more immersive experience, and it really sort of depends on the business need. You look at a retailer like Tom.
Did you do that, like, out in the world mobile experience with a device browser versus an app? Like, what are are there implications there that makes one harder than the other? I mean, I hear benefits of apps are that they're faster, they load better, they add more enriched experiences. Yet I read like App Boy studies that say, like, 2 days after new users install an app, 75% of them delete it, right? And then like 90 days later, 90% of the people have deleted it, or they're never going to use it and they forgot it's on their phone. Like, are there differences in, like, how do you think about that? Like, because obviously there's a trade-off there.
Well, I think to your point, it's about the business problem. So a lot of trade show business strategy is, how do I maximize that 10 by 20 real estate? So for a lot of software companies, they are using virtual reality where they were only able to demo to 2 customers or prospective customers. Now they could do 10 or 20 at a time because there isn't any audio overlay between the different people as they're being demoed. So that is one way to measure ROI. We're able to capture 600 prospects versus 60 prospects. So all these different business problems will have different solutions, but it does seem right now with VR and AR, it's an app strategy. It's not going to be in the browser.
Now, even app or web, like, to you two over there, like, I would say, like, just because we can, should I, like, does this extend, given the location element of what Pokemon Go has showed people, of how you can leverage the functionality of the data on the phone? Does this mean I'm going to make every outdoor ad my client does interactive, or not, or is it only certain digital outdoor ads, or like?
Well, for outdoor, and when you think of the opportunities with outdoor and digital outdoor, there's definitely ways to connect the two and to bring the consumer, have this dialogue between the consumer with the one-to-many and the one-to-one experience. And I think what, relating it back to the Pokemon Go, what it showed us was that there's this need for connection. So the cool thing about players on the app is that they're in the real world, but they're also interacting together. You see groups of people going around together, and it turns this, moment where a mobile phone or mobile screen can be very, insular, and you have the out-of-home real world being very like one-to-many. It bridges the two, and you're able to have that experience that connects with the one and the many, and they're also interacting at the same time.
So now, maybe for you, let me sort of amend that even a little further. Like, let's back up a little bit. Like, what was it that made Pokemon blow up? I mean, obviously it's simple, it's fun, like different age groups can do it, but like fundamentally, like what really, like, obviously you can't predict what's going to go viral and blow up, but like if there were a handful of things that you thought that they nailed that enabled it to go viral, like what would those be?
Yeah, I think part of it is the Pokemon assets, the characters themselves, really lend themselves to that kind of environment, right? And when we're talking about AR a la mobile phone, remember, we can't map our universe. So it's basically a sticker on your phone. It's not super interactive, but boy, that's a really cool sticker on your phone, even if it's not interacting in the physical world in which I exist. I think also too, there is a social aspect. I mean, when you're hanging out and you're playing Pokemon, it's like you're getting your freak on and everyone else is, and it's that's okay. That's like a community building experience. So I think that's part of it. Also too, the technology platform was amazing. I mean, we have tons of interesting Pokestops. We're learning about the environment in which we live. But I think the one cautionary tale I would say is, I think Pokemon Go as a phenomenon is unique to Pokemon. I don't think trying to replicate it makes sense. I do think leveraging it as in terms of local area advertising makes sense. I do think it makes sense. Really the big advantage is now everybody knows what AR is. Now it finally, it used to be a laughable thing because in 2009 we all thought it was going to be a big hit, and it wasn't. And now we can kind of revisit those old technologies and see what cool new things can we do with them.
So,
But it also, it teaches the behavior of the mechanics of the game, and that's, I think, the beauty of Pokemon. So if you do a version of Pokemon for Intel or Microsoft, people understand just the mechanics of this, so the adoption and how quick they can understand it without, a robust instruction guide or instruction interactive intro to the experience. It's great because they can dive in. They're like, this is just like Pokemon. It's the same mechanics, but it has an integrated commercial message into it. And we're seeing better adoption when we leverage certain mechanics that have proven at a mass scale.
well, it's funny, and I've spoken at a bunch of MediaPost events, and I've said this before, but that simplicity of that interface. My oldest son is going to be 9 in December. My little girl's like 6.5, and my youngest boy will be 4 next month. And all of my kids, when TV time's over, if I say TV time's over, they flip the fuck out, right? But if I just turn the TV off and they're looking, and I'm like, oh, Dad forgot to charge the TV. They're like, Dad, dude, you never forget to charge your phone. Like, come on, man. Like, how long is it going to take you to charge this TV? Like, come on, dude. Like, you can't do this. It's not cool, right? But it's funny, like the mechanics of it, they get so used to, right? And like the first time I did it, it's because I realized my kids were standing in front of the flat screen TV trying to change the channel. And it like wasn't working, right? And so it's funny how that works. So sidebar, trying to be funny guy. Clearly only, I would say about 10% of the room thought I was funny, but fine, screw you guys. Like, we'll keep going. Now, so let's turn it to like the pink elephant in the room. Like, what about all those shenanigans that happened with like, if you signed in with a Gmail account, because you were on an Android device, Google already knows every fucking thing you're doing. They got all your information. But if you were an Apple user and you had Gmail on your phone, Google doesn't have all that information. They don't have read access to your phone. But if I happen to sign up for Pokemon Go with a Gmail account, Niantic, a subsidiary of Alphabet, a Google company, instantly got access to read-write access of everything on my phone. And obviously, they made moves to rectify that, and they dressed with it. But what was that all about? Was that an oversight? Was that like trying to backdoor into like extra data? Like, because obviously, like you can do these cool things, but by doing it, you're generating a ton, like where I am, where I go, what's my walk to work? Because if I'm playing Pokemon and walk to work every day, you can map my walk to and from work every day. You know when I leave my house. You know when my house is empty. Like, I don't know if anybody in the room remembers the old Twitter account, Please Rob Me. So people posted on Twitter like, hey, I'm going on vacation. And they would map that back to, you kind of do the same thing. So like, what's your opinions of that?
I just think privacy is dead, and the most market people don't really care anymore. They just expect, like when you're in Facebook and they're recommending friends, it's like, how did you know I just emailed with those people? It's because like everything is being scanned. And
so long as you can give something good, I don't care.
Yeah, as long as the quality of the experience is there. I think that's why Pokemon Go has done really well. It's the quality of the experience combined with a great character and a great platform. But to your original statement, I don't think most people care anymore. The assumption is everything about me is being taken out of the phone, and it's okay to them as long as it's not being abused.
Yeah, it's too late. They already know where you are. So, and you're absolutely right. I mean, people always will give up information for services. So, and as a marketer, proximity technologies are awesome because now I know where people are and I can put them in a physical space and I can talk to them when they're in that physical space. And that analytics data is golden. But it's too late. They've already given up on it. So I, totally agree.
Yeah, and that's really important also, when you think of us in this room as marketers and brands, we're not trying to scare people or, invade their privacy, but it is helpful to know where people are, and we use that in a way that makes sense to provide messages that are valuable, that are contextually relevant, that make sense. And as these two said, it really depends on the business problem. And I think with an app like this, where you're bridging the physical and digital world, it makes a lot of sense for retailers that have physical product or stores like McDonald's.
But that makes sense. But did Pokemon win in that because they made it more clear that, watch out everybody, we have flying water bottles. Did they make it more clear that what that exchange was? Like, I know where you're going, and this is why Pokemons are popping up everywhere. And I'm gonna track you, and I'm gonna help you catch cool Pokemon. Or was it like, is that just something those of us in the industry and politicians want to talk about? Like, is it that far when you say people don't care? Like, or was it?
Well, when
like,
you get
need
an
to
interstitial
explain?
from Facebook Connect and it's like hit accept before you connect and use it as a login, does anyone really read that little interstitial? Just like, of course, go, 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 connect me. I don't care. But in it says, we're taking your email address. We know who all your friends are. You're letting us market to them as well. I don't think people care.
Well,
as
it's kind
long
of like
as
those stupid games on Facebook. What superhero are you? Like, and like, I even fall for it. I'm like, oh, I kind of want to do that. And then it's like, I want all your contacts. I want everything in your calendar. Sorry, who the hell's calling me? Let me ignore them. I'm using my phone to try and keep track on time so I can stay on time for these guys. And somebody called me and totally messed up the time tracking. But like, what is that balance of, like, you hear a lot about, it's about the value exchange. The consumer knows you're tracking them, and they don't care as long as you give them something good. I mean, they'll give you their grandmother's social security number if you give them a good discount, right? Or, like, how far do you have to go to explain that? Or is it just literally like, if the experience is good, it doesn't matter?
it's our clients' lawyers. They're all over us to make sure we've got the cookie messages and all those, we follow the rules, but we're going to always push back. It's the same thing when we're integrating forms. The CRM team wants 92 fields, the designers want 4. So it's always this balancing act between legal, CRM, and the creative folks, and finding that middle ground or create the right experience.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody's reading the privacy policies, to be clear. And the reality is things like machine learning get way, way better with more data, and people know that.
Except for Microsoft's when they went on like the Jewish Nazi rampage. Everybody remember that in the news?
I think I missed that one.
It's kind of funny. Like,
Yeah,
I know
don't
it's like
use
inappropriate
Twitter
topic, but
to
it
train
is kind of funny
your
that
AI.
like the AI just went ballistic.
I didn't see that.
It was good, dude. So, like, I know, Chuck, I think we're getting dang near where you want us. Like, I haven't seen the hook come out from my neck yet, but I'm looking at my clock, and I think we're there. Like, do you have a final question for the group, or you just want to go to questions?
I wonder what you deal with marketers who don't understand anything about Pokemon Go other than they see all the headlines. It's almost like talking to someone about VR who hasn't seen it.
You know, it's simple. I can drive myself off a cliff without watching Pokemon Go on my phone. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys answer that for real.
Yeah, no, and we've definitely had, we had clients come to us. They saw Pokemon Go. They're like, what's this phenomenon? Please tell me, and how do we make money off of it? And I think there's 2 things. So number 1 is, when you're talking about AR and VR in general, you have to get a headset on somebody. Right, now that's not necessarily Pokemon AR, but they usually want to know the entire spectrum. And so what we try to do is, if we are the first person to put a Vive or an Oculus on somebody's head, then we have an emotional moment with a client. They will never forget us. They may not hire us, but they definitely won't forget us. So I think for a lot of them, it's unpacking what's actually happening, giving them some tools to make really great experiences, but also that fades really quickly. So unless you come up with some ROI for them, they're probably not going to go forward with the project.
So now, Chuck, given that question, again, I've done this a couple times tonight. Let me append that for you two. In that, like, given that, what are the differences between AR, VR when my device has to be tethered to a phone or a computer, or like a HoloLens where it's like an onboard computer and I don't have to tether it to anything? Like, are there differences in that? Does it matter?
Well, we're seeing in a lot of the experiences we're creating, especially at the conference level, that we're bringing devices and have it all rigged up and ready to go, because we don't want to wait for anyone to be downloading apps or anything like that. So speed to the experience is critical for a lot of the experience that we have working with Microsoft and Intel.
Yeah, I'd say it's a totally different experience having an untethered device on your head like a HoloLens. As an example, I mean, it's just that having that freedom to be able to move around, it makes all the difference in the world. But again, you get better computing power if you plug it in. But I think there are definitely some huge differences, yeah.
It's a trade-off, right? That computing power versus that movement of freedom. Chuck, do you have any more, or the audience?
Could you give us some specific examples of what your retail or consumer product clients are expecting to deliver to their audiences in these environments, or ideas that you're kicking around?
So we work with the country's largest satellite-based internet service provider, and they go through a dealer network. So we're looking at using Pokemon Go type techniques to drive people to the actual dealer stores, where traditionally, when you live in
If you buy the Jetta, I'll give you Pikachu.
Exactly. Well, a lot of these services, internet's like, it comes with free installation, will come to your house, but that doesn't help the dealer network. So what we're looking at doing is using the Pokemon hook to drive people to a physical store where it's like the equivalent of a check-in, so that they can get the value trade-off is they get some of the Pokemon, and then for them they get dealer traffic. So there's that trade-off happening there. That's one of the examples how we're using it for retail and experimenting with it.
Yeah, and I think there's really sort of two variants of that in terms of practical uses for retail. So on the one hand, there's the immersive experience to get people in the store, right? So someone like Topshop in UK, did a virtual fashion week. Of course, VR, AR, Snapchat, and chatbots are all over this Fashion Week, but they used it because I can't go to Fashion Week. It's an awesome experience. I can get people in store by having Oculus headsets there for them to see the experience. So that's one end of the spectrum. I think the other end of the spectrum is pairing it with proximity technology, and my mobile phone is now a display device in the store that I don't have to maintain or own. And so I think that's where we start looking at things like, hey, if I can overlay my phone on products and get additional information, this is helpful, right? Because I can compete against an Amazon. And so I think I would look at that as kind of the other end of the spectrum, which is a bit more pragmatic. But those are just a couple of ideas. But then again, you look at folks like Tom's, they used it as a branding thing. They have a one-for-one program that they give away shoes if you buy one, and no one believed they did it. So what did they do? They had an AR experience where you actually saw one of these giving trips.
So good, but I can see him getting nervous. You seem like you want to put a microphone up, but you got 3 seconds or less. Go.
Okay. Well, for us, it's about, starting with the space. So what's interesting for the out-of-home advertising arena is, everyone's on their phone, but we're looking at how do we engage with people where the marketing moment starts in the real time, in the real world context, and you have a lot of this digital out-of-home technology that's really kicking off. So for example, here in New York, you have Link NYC, which is replacing all of the old school phone booths, and those are not only digital screens, but they're also Wi-Fi hubs, and they also have open APIs. So we're exploring around the idea of how to leverage this for brands where that you have consumers on the move, traveling through New York City, in a hurry, but also that you have this technology now that can interact with people and create a marketing moment or a useful interaction that can help people move through the world and throughout their day.
And so, a little longer than 3 seconds, that was a good, concise answer. That was nice, a good place to end. And given that it's 4:20, I figured, what a better time to end this panel.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. So that's what we'll do on a VR project. To lead this discussion is Cedric Devitt, the Chief Creative Officer of Big Spaceship. I will turn this over to Cedric. Please join me in welcoming the panel.
Thank you. Excellent. We have an amazing panel here. These guys, I've just spent the last 25 minutes backstage with them, and I'm a total expert now on VR, and I know exactly what to do and what not to do. So hopefully by the end of this, you guys will too. We've got Jordan Osborne. She is an innovation lead at Ignition Factory with us, part of OMD. Andrew Klein leads MediaVest, Spark's social experience and custom product team. He's a total genius. Steve Callan is the director of creative technology for Hill Holiday. This is Steve here. And then we've got JM, who's a VP strategy at Giant Spoon. Okay, so I think we were going to kick this off a lot about sort of the basics, but I think that you've heard about the basics from about sort of 7 different people already today. Dave Meeker, thank you. I learned a lot earlier on from your presentation, so that's fantastic. So we won't go into the AR, VR, 360, what is it, what isn't it. I think I want to just jump into some of these folks they've got some deep experience on some recent projects that I think we can talk about. So I want to ask JM to talk a little bit about an experience. He went to see this Ghostbusters show. He told us all about it backstage. It sounded really fascinating. So over to you for a couple of minutes.
So I'm not taking any credit for the Ghostbusters experience. Had nothing to do with it other than waking up early this morning to get in line and dodge the Elmo characters to be able to walk into Madame Tussauds. So the Ghostbusters experience, I think, was one of the most immersive experiences I've ever had in a virtual reality space, or even like spatial virtual reality, where we're kind of going next, which a lot of brands haven't taken advantage of quite yet, but it is phenomenal how immersive it is. Just so you know, it's done by a company called The Void, which is making waves right now in virtual reality. They are coming up with the first virtual reality theme park. They were tapped to do this, and it is remarkable. So just in short, you put on goggles that have headphones and a walkie-talkie system built into it. You have a haptic vest that you put on that actually responds with vibrations to what's happening on the goggles, and you actually have a gun that you hold that vibrates and makes sounds. And you're a Ghostbuster. You basically go and capture ghosts, but the ghosts fly through you and you feel them fly through you. If somebody shoots you with a proton gun, then you feel it vibrate. And also, because it's spatial and it knows where you are, it also knows where everybody else is in that experience. So I was able to look over and see one of my coworkers in a Ghostbuster outfit and looking around and laughing and like trying to shoot me to make me tickle more. I'm like, knock it off, shoot her back. Anyway, but not only that, but now you go through all these elements where the room has been mapped. So if I was in an elevator at one point and I backed up to the wall because this little girl ghost scared me and I didn't want to interact with her, so I backed up to the wall and there was a wall there, exactly where it should be. Or there was when there was a part where there was a skyscraper, there was wind on my face and I felt it, like there was an explosion, and then I could feel the wind from the skyscraper, or being the exposed skyscraper. So all in all, I was telling these guys that for the first time, I think ever, I could not get myself back to our reality if I stopped to think about it while I was in that experience. I had a hard time remembering that I'm basically in a room full of cubicles. I'm in a room with nothing. They're just all blank walls. There's nothing there, and I could not stop to get my brain back to that spot again until at the very end when I lifted up the goggles and I looked back really quick because I wanted to see what it looked like, and it was all just plywood walls all over the place. What's really interesting about this is I find from a business perspective, it is so interesting how this was put together. I don't know the details, but you have 3 players that are involved with this. That is kind of what we do all the time, is kind of stitching together all these brands that want to do something innovative with a company that's very innovative, and potentially a media partner, or a partner that's going to make it amplified. And so you had Madame Tussauds that had the room. You had Sony, who had the picture, and then you had The Void, who had the technology, and that is just like the dream combination, I think, for something like this. So if you haven't checked it out, you do have to pay the $40 to see the wax figures, but it's $30 on top of it. But it is phenomenal, and if you get there, I got there at 10, did it right at 10, so you can kind of beat the crowd. But I think it's a great way to kind of kick off this whole conversation of where it's going, but maybe where we've been to get here.
The analogy of Madame Tussauds moving from wax to that is, that just not, it's a big leap for them.
Yeah, and one little thing is that the details going into it really made the experience that much better too, because it wasn't just a pop-up that happened to be there. You go down a subway, and then there's wax figures that are down there, and then you see the cast of the latest Ghostbusters movie that are all blown out in wax, and so it kind of felt like a natural transition. It didn't feel like it was forced. It felt like it was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will have virtual wax figures in the future, potentially.
I think it is a good start to kind of start with probably the coolest, most advanced VR experience that's out there today. Because it's really important when you're working with brands and advertisers to understand what are you going to create and what are you trying to achieve with virtual reality, because a lot of brands and advertisers and even content creators are still trying to grasp and perfect just 360 video using real people in the real world and capturing that in 360, which is a challenge in itself. But then you start, making these huge leaps, and they're changing every day with new types of technology, where you go from, 360 video that's still on linear screens to Google Cardboard to Samsung Gear, then you leap to Oculus, and then HTC Vive, which powers the Ghostbusters experience. When you have hands and you have the ability to really not only immerse, but interact with everything around you. And that's, super complex and an amazing experience that is, when you start having hands and you can start interacting with real objects in VR, everything melts away, and that is so real. And you could really tell those stories and have a true experience rather than this just passive story where you're going on a linear journey, but you could look wherever you want. But part of the challenges that we see as an agency is, everyone's now very, very excited to create 360 and VR content, but you have to work with brands and creatives to really understand what are you trying to achieve and what do you want to build, and helping them through those pieces of technology, which again are changing every day. So being able to test and, basically have your clients take the red pill to get sucked into VR, but try all the different types of technologies will help guide that conversation and what's that output creative that you're going to have.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with a lot of pulling people in from the agency, because what we need to do first before any of this is a lot of education. And we heard a lot about this earlier on today around the differences between 360 video and VR. And what JM's talking about here is immersive VR. It's not what we're getting over Facebook and YouTube. And there's a lot of education that has to happen during that ideation process to say, wouldn't a Ghostbusters experience be awesome? Yes, it would be, but can we bring that to life? And at what scale? Where do we do this? How do we do this?
What cost?
At what cost? Absolutely.
I think what's also really interesting, even just maybe I'm biased because I'm working with the agency perspective, but from a Madame Tussauds perspective, they probably haven't had anything really new in their space in years. So for them to have this, be up against this business challenge where they have, all of these other entertainment properties and things throughout New York City where they're offering new, awesome, immersive experiences, what's a good natural fit for them to take their business and translate that into something that's actually making you guys, plan your day as people working in the industry to just go see it and experience it. So I would say, even from their end, yes, they have the space, but they also have the right to play in that space. They have the licenses to the characters. They have access to, big brands like Sony to even give them the right to start that conversation. So as somebody who works on retail clients who are asking, and I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing, how do we use new tech to drive foot traffic? How do we use it to drive interest in things that people have kind of lost interest in? I think that the best way to learn is to look at the players who are doing it really well, and I think that as we all are speaking from a tech perspective, it's a great example. I think it's also a really cool example from their perspective of how they've changed and adapted with all this new technology, their business model.
So that you bring up a really interesting point. I mean, certainly one of the things that I'm hearing a lot from clients is, when we talk about these VR immersive experiences, is they want to know about the ROI. They want to know, hey, listen, who's going to see this? How many people can actually experience this amazing thing that we're going to create? So let's talk a little bit about the shareability of this sort of stuff. Where is that going to happen, or are we still stuck in this place where we're just sort of shouting into the cave?
There's definitely shareability, and I think that comes when you are working with your media teams and your client to really understand how you're going to distribute this content. We've been working very hard with a variety of vendors to, start creating virtual reality pre-roll to get to the right users, and actually, they're already in a headset, they're ready to consume a VR piece of content. So this is actually the optimal time to do that, rather than kind of tweeting it out or putting it on Facebook and say, hey, check out this link and go find a Google headset or any VR headset you could find, put it on and try it. Getting somebody who's right there in the moment, and then pushing that content to them is something that we're been doing right now, and it's absolutely awesome. But we are actually using more some traditional methods of measurement and understanding, what are people's responses? Does this provide brand lift, brand favorability? And we're putting those measurements into place with our research teams to really understand what's happening inside of the VR content. So we know, are people looking at our product? Is the product resonating with them? We did this great case for Gillette called the Pressure Chamber that was at South by, where we had 4D chairs synced to videos and really wanted to make people sweat for their deodorant, and it was awesome. But we made sure that we surveyed every person, but then we also took that content, which we made in partnership with Discovery, to make sure that we hit every distribution channel that could be shareable. We did have content that was on YouTube and Facebook for their 360 platforms. We also made sure that we were in the right distribution channels for VR headsets, so that way people can share, trended, and we got people who, if you have Samsung gear installed on your Samsung device, we made sure that we were able to hit people, so that way when they were on Facebook newsfeed on their mobile device, they could immediately pop that right into their head. So making sure you're using all the tools in your arsenal to get content out there to the right people in the right timing, not when they're not able to have a 360 immersive VR experience, but making sure that you're hitting them when they're ready to accept it, and it works.
And I think as we talk about shareability, we have to think about output of these activations as well, where pretty much all you're getting is a photo of you with a goggle on your head, and no matter what experience that is that you do, you maybe get a logo in the corner that says like what it was that you just did. Even the Ghostbusters experience, there was no photography at all. Like, they're on lockdown, and they just took a picture of me in the gear, which is pretty cool because it's the coolest looking gear, but it captures nothing of what the experience was. And quite frankly, it's probably not something I'm going to share because it doesn't really do anything. It's not valuable to anybody else. So I think one of the things was this shareability factor of that actually killed a VR idea that we tried to pitch to NBC 2 years ago at Comic-Con 2015. They had a show called Constantine, and it turned into a dome experience instead, because we knew that people could take a picture of that together. The scale of it was something worth talking about. The fact that 50 people were in that room experiencing it all at the same time was something. When we did sorry, so I was just saying that was a great moment because you could actually share that experience. VR has had a tough time with that until now, with like this with the Vive, being able to actually see somebody and experience it together and doing something in a co-op kind of environment is very new. The other thing too is with the Vive, they've developed where you can have a camera that's in there with you, and it becomes another player, but it's actually capturing what you would see if you were that player. So now you have a green screen experience that's there. So if we were to be doing this virtually, we could be in an empty warehouse right now wearing goggles, but the camera would capture it with a room full of people, and when you would actually share it out to people. So this is a relatively new technology. It's not being applied to a lot of what the brands are putting out right now, but you can see that this is the next level of, instead of saying, I just fought this giant with this gun, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man with a gun, you can see it. That's the video I share. I'm still wearing the goofy goggles and the vest and everything, but you actually see that experience with me. That's something.
Of the virtual world, right? Yeah. That people love. Nobody loves a reaction GIF better than than anything else possibly on the internet. But the idea of being able to see you, that's what's meaningful to your friends. You kind of freaking out or having falling down during the roller coaster experience. So that's a different way of looking at shareability.
And I also think like word of mouth for just trying virtual experiences goes a long way. But what we're seeing right now is a lot of people are on Twitch and on YouTube Live gaming, what they're doing is capturing their reaction in the real world plus what content people are seeing on screen. And there's even a bigger leap right now, especially in esports, where you're going to start spectating within the games itself, and viewers at home can actually put on the headset and be in the tournament with, you know, fireballs and lightning bolts and everything else flying around. But having that kind of, even though you're not in the VR experience, but watching somebody else have that fantastic time and freaking out,
aspect, I think, is
gets people
sort of
excited.
Next wave of what we're sort of moving into. I think that's what people are looking for. They're saying, okay, up until now, it's sort of been this very solo, independent activity. How do we make it communal? So.
Yeah. And there's huge leaps happening in just platforms like AltSpace, which is a social platform available across Samsung Gear as well as Oculus and Vive, where I was in a comedy club with people around the world watching Reggie Watts do a live comedy show, and he was an avatar but looked like him, and he was doing his shtick, and it was hilarious, and everyone else is laughing, and the closer you get to other people, you hear them laughing and giggling, and just being in a virtual a comedy club, watching an actual comedian perform is almost just as good. I mean, you really have that experience, and you have that communal feeling that, hey, we're all laughing together.
Were you able to heckle?
Yeah, I was that guy.
So yeah, I think that it's really fascinating. I mean, when we talk about the ROI of these kinds of things, I was reading about Verse or Within's project around the Syrian refugees, and you know, amazing films, totally immersive, really meaningful, and you know, the reaction to that was it got a 15% interaction rate versus a 1% that you usually get for a direct response, okay? So that's, I think when you can make people feel, and that is the promise of VR, you know, you can get people to do the things as brands that you really want them to do. So
yeah, and a lot of that is being driven just by kind of indie gamers and developers in general, and they don't play by the same rules as everybody else does and the stuff that we interact with every day. There was a game that won Indie Game of the Year 2 years ago that was all about a dad dealing with a child who had cancer, and the whole game was that you'd hear him crying and like you try to soothe him and you can't, and that was the game. And it wasn't a game as we know it, but that was the experience. And so it seems like we're kind of warming up to the idea of putting on goggles and throwing yourself in the middle of Syria, because that is heavy and it's unfiltered and it's real, and it's an amazing territory. And I think it's an amazing territory for brands, and it's I think it's going to be a hard thing for people to go and search for themselves. It seems like it still needs to be eventized. It still needs to be grounded somewhere, that you're giving people the most immersive experience you can, rather than just somebody welcoming it and putting on a Sony headset, a Sony PlayStation headset on their couch. But I mean, to make people feel good, bad, happy, sad is going to be incredible. The same way that we've done advertising for 100 years, just evolved.
Yeah, and I think with the corporate social responsibility programs, it fits very well with that type of empathy-driven experience. But you can also do things that are happy, to your point. And I think through that, it starts to build direct ROI correlation to it. It's that brand sentiment that's going to rise.
I think this is also a really unique example, and I know that most of us are familiar with Tom's and what their business model is and how closely that ties into their corporate social responsibility initiatives. I mean, their business is built on that. And what we also know about millennials in general is that not only when it comes to giving, they are unique from generations before them, they're a lot more demanding of transparency of where their money is actually going. And so it's a lot harder for them to justify, contributing to a cause if they are just writing off a check or handing over money. What Tom's has done with virtual reality is they've actually used it as a utility to show people what it feels like to deliver, an actual case of shoes to the children who need them. And not that it's a matter of, taking it and finding it as a way to sell more shoes for them, but to also show people, peel back the curtain and show the brand transparency between them actually doing what they say that they're doing. So using it as a branding tool to bring the messaging, what a lot of our big brands that we work on are already doing, to a way that is very real, that people can experience themselves and see without having to fly them to another country, I think is also super valuable too.
And the real part is, what I think we have to really crack, because there's so much 360 content that's out there right now where, again, it's passive and you're just kind of just going for the journey and you can freely look around whatever you want. But again, when you start looking at the technology that's happening right now and growing, and even in October, we're going to have PlayStation VR that's going to launch, and that's going to totally change the game, where you have 150 launch titles, plus you're actually going to, again, have these hand controls where you're going to start interacting with things. And, besides just storytelling, how do you give users the experience to participate and be there? And it's really, no one's necessarily cracked the code. Again, the Ghostbusters experience is great because that is so different and really evolved from just a short time span, but no one's really cracked the code of using immersive technology and how can we make these interactions become totally different experiences to just break out of that linear storytelling. And I do feel it's up to brands and advertisers who technically have the budgets and have the power and connections to make something magical happen. So I think that's what we're going to start seeing right now as we're getting more handsets, we're getting gloves, we're having all these accessories to bring yourself into the experience like never before, where your whole body is there and you can use it. And that's where everything's going to start changing and you become part of the experience.
I think the power of partnerships is really pushing this forward too, because any one brand alone, this is a tall order. It's a tall order to develop, it's a tall order to distribute, it's a tall order to build an experience where you're really getting the most benefit out of this VR experience. One of the things we're very proud of that we did was a deal with GE and the New York Times, and we distributed over 1 million cardboard, Google Cardboard, to the general, to New York Times subscribers, and it came alongside with the GE virtual reality experience. And I think when we talk about brand behavior and the why behind why you want to do it, GE's is easy because they're an innovative company and they want to be known as innovative, and so they did a very innovative thing by bringing this technology that was generally unavailable to the majority of the public and brought it to their doorstep, literally. I think it's hard when you have other brands that want to jump into, because you have to have a reason why, or else it just feels like a very Me Too idea. I think that's where you have to challenge yourself. Innovation is not enough anymore. It's much more about what is the story and why does it matter in VR.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, what I'm saying is a series of one-offs, right? Where brands are jumping in, companies are jumping in, but they don't really seem to have well, what are we going to do next, right? And so I think the future is going to be more episodic, where people are releasing series. I think the New York Times, they committed to it. They hired 9 editors to really focus on this material and go really immersive. Mm-hmm. So, I think having a plan, the what's next bit is pretty important.
The partnerships can give you that too, right? So you look at Discovery VR and what they're doing. Actually working closely with them, you can bring to life some of your brands through some of their content on a regular basis. And it goes back to the point about partnerships. Working with folks who have done this, definitely at least from the production side, is going to be huge. So the creative side, agencies, we can spend all day thinking about it, and there's value, and we can go into depth on prototyping, but actually bringing things to life, the partnerships are going to be key.
And Discovery VR is a good example too. We did Warner Brothers is one of our clients, and we did a Tarzan Infinity Room. So I don't know if you've seen this Infinity Room that's at the Broad in LA, but it's like Instagram fodder. It's just a space that you take a photo in, and you can't see a wall. It just looks like you're floating in space. We did that with the jungle and brought it to 5 cities or so. But we also partnered with Discovery VR and did a VR experience of what that looked like to actually be inside of that. So it just, again, like, we didn't have to build the platform. We didn't have to build anything out on our own. We partnered with Discovery VR, who already had it, and had an audience that was already there to consume VR, and then just now had the Tarzan brand along for the ride.
Which goes back to the shareability side of things. So if if you're trying to build your own app and do it yourself, that's probably a little crazy. It makes a lot more sense to find a platform that's already out there, and it might be a Discovery VR or Within or something to that effect.
The other thing too is I think we're talking about two extremes here. We're talking about like 360 video, and then we're talking about like the best of the best with the Void, and pretty much like the Void is probably booked for the next 10 years, I would assume, because they're the best of the best. But there's a really nice middle section where it's like you could take a 360 video and do something really cool with that experientially that makes it better than a 360 video, makes it different than when you're watching it at home. And you could take a lot of the learnings that like a Ghostbusters experience is doing and bring them now towards a more scaled down experience and make it just as effective.
Yeah, it depends upon the audiences, and we're really, the VR space and getting technology in the hands of actual consumers is growing, and again, with PlayStation launching next month, the bar will be set pretty high, and I don't think a lot of advertisers and people who are creating 360 content and VR content now really realize the impact that PlayStation VR, which is completely sold out and will get in the homes of gamers. Depends, whatever your first experience is in VR is going to be wow, but it depends where you start. I still utilize Chris Milk's journey, his first, journey into the beautiful place, and people are still like, oh my God, that's great. But then if you put somebody into a Vive headset, they're like, oh my God, their mind is blown, they are freaking out, and they can't really go back. And so now you're going to have PlayStation VR who's going to come out again with like 150 real game titles, long form, where we're creating these like 2-minute little VR 360 blips. But compared to what people are going to experience at scale next month and going through holiday, is going to totally set the bar super high, where we're going to have to start partnering with different partners. We're going to have to start partnering seriously with game developers, people who understand game engine content, how to build in that space, probably more so than the 360 just capture. We're going to see some cool stuff coming because the Samsung Gear camera came out, so you can capture 360 kind of easily, and Nikon also came out with their 360 cam. Will be higher quality, but you're going to see the difference between animated CGI game engine content and VR experiences that are fully immersive, and then when you go back to see this, I'm around this space, you're going to be like, I'm okay. So the bar is going to get set pretty high, which as technology just keeps getting better, the costs come down, it's going to be a continuous evolution of, oh my God, what are we going to do? And somebody's going to come up with something absolutely nuts.
Okay, so I'm not sure how much time we have left, but 5 minutes. Okay, great. I just want to make one last quick question, and then maybe we take some questions. I'm not sure what the format is. That good? That's a good format. Yeah, he's what is the technology that's the exponential technology that we're going to overlay onto VR that's going to take it to the next level?
It's going to be mixed reality. I don't think that in probably 5 years we're going to still be using VR headsets where you're closed off and in this separate world. You will start seeing, and I hope they come out very soon, hopefully this year, but companies like Magic Leap, who are going to do the most mind-blowing things where you're mixing the real world with what you're seeing, and you're going to be able to overlay all these content experiences with everything that's happening in your room, no matter where you are. Even if you're outdoors in the city, you'll be able to have these experiences anywhere you go, rather than having to kind of shut yourself down into this VR closed-off world. Even though it might be social, you're still closed, and it's different. So the mixed reality that's coming out is probably going to change everything, and I feel like in 5 years, the Gear VR headset was that'll be great. That made sense then. The technology was there, but the technology is going to change so quickly that it's going to change how we engage, and it's going to be real world, and I'll be able to be here with it on, see everything I need to, and be absolutely wild. But that is where it's going. It's going to be mixed.
I would say too, as we have a separate gaming division, Zero Code, and they've been working and, following VR trends for, years before, I guess, even our biggest clients started asking. And they built out an experience for Gatorade where it puts you actually in the cleats of Bryce Harper, and not only were you experiencing the thoughts that he had as a pitcher was pitching to him, and, hearing audio in 360 as well to really make it an immersive experience, But, you know, people were asking, well, I want to play. And even when they were standing with the headset on, they were even putting their arms out, you know, getting ready to swing. And I think that what people are going to start expecting, and, you know, where we see the natural progression coming, is people want to not only watch this world and be taken through this world, they want to be a part of it. And what we think that that's going to end up leading us into is really just creating an immersive experience in the truest sense of the word. Maybe it even means that the headsets are coming off. Maybe it is beyond mixed reality and augmented reality and virtual reality. Maybe it's building out experiences like the Ghostbusters experience, where using depth perception and using things like the Google Tango, that's going to completely revolutionize the way that you can map out the spaces around you to make people almost get confused between what's happening. It's not going to be mixed reality or augmented or virtual. It's going to be reality, and it's going to be as immersive as it's ever been.
I think that's all super exciting stuff. What I'm hoping to see next is really those shared experiences. So when you and your significant other can be in the living room and share something together. Right now, when you put that headset on, you're removed from the outside world, and that's great for that moment, but it can be a little lonely over time. So it's nice to share those experiences, which is a little bit of the Ghostbusters, when you can actually see someone in there and reach out and touch them. And I think that's what Facebook and Oculus are really looking to do.
Yeah, and I think that the level of scrutiny that's going to be on the future of VR, outside of just doing 360 video, I still think 360 video has a place. I still think that that's a great low expenditure experience that you can still do and make it really immersive and scalable, especially as all the headsets start rolling out in all their own categories and through their own suppliers. I feel like what you said earlier, like leaning on game developers, people that understand kind of immersive, interactive storytelling, I think is going to be more important than leaning on any creatives that you know now, anybody that you lean on now. I feel like they've done it for years. There's a science to it, there's a psychology to it, and it's going to be even more important to tap into that as we try to make a virtual reality more realistic.
Yeah, totally agree. I think we got to. It's all about the guys who know how to do this stuff, not the people who've lived in TV.
Okay, questions? Questions, anybody? I've got a quick one. All of the hardware research forecasts for the next 5 years show that the overwhelming majority of headset type stuff is cardboard type stuff. I mean, not cardboard, but where do you see the market shaking out? I mean, clearly that's going to be the mass thing as a piece of technology. Do you? I mean, how do you play with that context if that's a 75–80% market share kind of thing as a device, or do you simply ignore it and go the other way?
It depends what you're planning, and it's all about planning, media planning, and working with your creatives. Again, what are you trying to get across, and what is your end goal for a brand to come into a VR space, and what's the purpose? What are you trying to do? If you want massive scale, you do 360 video that can be popped into a cardboard unit that's very low cost, and a lot of people just have them lying around. Again, as people start trying these more high-end experiences with Vive, with PlayStation VR, they're going to feel that, okay, this is awesome. Their friends are going to try it, and then that's what's going to perpetuate higher-end experiences and technology to have that themselves. So I do absolutely believe that, Gear, Samsung Gear and Vive and Oculus and even PlayStation VR, which everyone has, or whoever has a PlayStation 4 is ready to plug in and go, that's really going to grow. And people are going to actually demand higher quality, more immersive experiences over the next couple of years.
Also, the innovative takeaway from that, one is really, 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 really neat, and the other one is complete escapism. I mean, just completely gone. You're a different place, a different person with a different task.
So I have a question. Basically, I was in Tokyo like 2 weeks ago for Tokyo Game Show. I captured a video of a person doing VR in green screen, sent it to a media partner just because I love VR, and it generated 1.2 million views on Facebook in 10 days, and 5,000 retweets, etc. We didn't even put the name of the game. We just literally put the green screen and the person doing the thing. How do you get any results from that? Because I was just a random passerby seeing the exhibit and generate a ton of interest, but it didn't even link back to the brand. it just linked back to the idea and concept of like this is what VR could be in the future. And to touch upon also with the branded experiences, I got to go to Disrupt SF, like I think that was like 2 weeks ago as well. Tried the Westworld HBO VR experience. That was absolutely incredible. But I asked them, like, are you going to do that anywhere else? And they said, no, we built this just for Disrupt. And it was like a VR experience that blended into a 360 video. And I was like, how do I get this at home? How do you deal with that kind of scale then? And the line was ridiculous. Like, yeah.
You're definitely touching on something in the sense that VR has been the thing of sci-fi since the 80s or before. So people are so excited about it. When the Nintendo Virtual Boy came out in '96, people got all excited, and then they actually started using it and realized, wow, this isn't actually it. But I think when people are seeing green screens and they're seeing what's possible with VR, there's a sense of excitement that, wow, this is a real thing now, and we can really transport ourselves someplace else. But you bring up a great point around how does the brands break through that noise? And it was said earlier, and I totally believe it, that you can't do VR just for VR's sake. So what's that brand experience look like? And how do you convey the empathy and everything else?
And these things are turning more and more into theme park rides. The more that they invest into the elements in that space to make it feel even more real, whether that be heat or mist or fans or whatever, and it's like just this one experience. Of course, you have a problem with throughput. Like that's the hardest part of the whole entire sell. You try to sell something at Comic-Con, you tell them that only 2,000 people a day can do it. That's a tough sell, but it has to be worth it. Much like the Westworld thing, I'm sure was completely worth it. But the oh, I lost my train of thought. But the thing is, it's also no.
Okay, gotcha. Don't worry about it. So I hope you did the one with the sword fighting girl. Was that your video? I love that video, and I got so excited for that game. That looks amazing and so cool that she was like dressed up as the character in the real world too. But awesome video. But there was nothing around there, and there's you have to. As a brand, you have to work with all your teams. You have to work with your digital activation team, your social teams, your PR teams, your experiential teams, because if you're going to do a pop-up event like that, you want to make sure to have all your branding surrounding that, so that way when people are doing Snapchats, Instagrams, taking photo of that they know who provided that content. It's just being really smart about your on-site activations, and then how are you tracking and measuring the earned media that comes out of it. You had 1.2 million views. Well, that's a good number to start with, and then just, tie that back to the brand if they find it. But that's, again, having your PR teams and people who are tracking all of that and measuring it will give you those results at the end of the day. We make sure that we do that with our VR activations, that we're tracking every single component of that, so that way we make sure this is the ROI that we're getting back, and this is, the brand lift studies that we have associated with that. So you have to use your whole media team when you're creating this content to really blow it out and make sure you're tracking and following everything, so you can measure it at the end of the day.
And as agencies, we have to be aware of the details too. The headsets almost went out without GE branding on them. So every news article was going to write about this partnership with New York Times and GE, but at the last minute, we were able to get the logo on there, and now it was in every single photo that was covered with these headsets. And that was just something that we have to be aware of like, where does that branding happen? The video you were shooting, I'm sure you were shooting like another person's screen, where they're capturing it. Why was there not an overlay of the brand on that? Then 1.2 million people would have seen that there was a logo down in the, on the bottom, that there would have been a bug or something that would have shown that, that this was brought to you by X. So that was, I think, a miss on that brand's behalf.
I would say also, going back to your point, Andrew, is making sure that on site, the way that you set it up is really smart, and the way that even if you can't experience it as a consumer, what are, the hundreds of people who are waiting in line, what are they experiencing? Are they having a bad experience because they're sitting there and waiting in line for 45 minutes to get to a VR experience that really isn't that great? And what are the consumers who are watching it live stream or tuning into Twitter and following it? What are those experiences for them? So, are you just taking that experience that you've built out to be seen with an Oculus or a really quality device, and you're just translating that to 360 video so that people who are in the rest of the world that aren't living in New York and aren't having the same experiences that we are they seeing this 360 video and being like, well, that's it? That's what they waited in line for that long? Like, that's not really that worth it. I would never wait in line for that. You want to kind of tease it so that there still is that allure and there still is that mystery behind what is that experience that's so cool? What is it that makes it so different? And then when it does get that scale, and it's not just, the advertising industry and the marketing industry and the gaming industry that's experienced it. I'm from South Carolina. I would say comfortably about 90% of my friends have never tried virtual reality. I mean, they just haven't had the exposure to it that we have.
Yeah.
So I think that that's just important, is how is the rest of the world seeing it outside of just us that are so deeply rooted in impressions and earned and owned and paid social and things like that.
And if you want to see an example of what we were talking about, of like next level VR and the capture with the mixed reality capture, well, you can go to his video. So if you want to share that link out, and you'll have 1.2 million and 30 views. But I would go to Valve VR and look at what Valve's doing. They have a really great reel that shows what's capable of VR and especially how we can start sharing it out in certain cases. But it's phenomenal if you really want to be inspired about the future of VR.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm getting the nod here from this gentleman. Thank you very much. Amazing panel. Brilliant.
Thank you.
That's it.
Well done. You have to love the irony in all this technology, and we're finally down to printing a logo on the side of a piece of cardboard so that people can take a picture of it and send it in a print publication. Love this. Great job, guys. Thank you very much. Very good. That concludes our session for the day. I hope this has been useful for you.